Thank you. Mr. van der Lanotte, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, honourable members of the Grand Chamber. The independence of the judiciary is guaranteed when there is no legitimate and reasonable doubt that the courts decide in an independent way. And this independence is supposed to exist. The applicant has to prove the contrary. That's the principle. The government states that the applicant raised this lack of independence of the Turkish courts in an abstract manner. We deny that, and we will prove it. We will do that by making 8 statements, 8 points, clearly showing the enormous pressure on judges deciding in the case of the applicant and the substantial impact of this pressure leading to the absence of the guarantee of irremovability and irrevocability. Due to logical time restraints, it will not be possible to illustrate each of these 8 points with all the underlying cases. However, where needed to illustrate a point, I will give one, be a typical example. I want to emphasize that none of the numerous examples that have been given and presented to the court in the different documents, until today, none has been contradicted by the government. First point, the negative role of the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors. I will each time say the High Council, that's easier. Article 3 of the Decree Law number 667, in contradiction to normal constitutional guarantees, stipulates that judges and prosecutors may be not only suspended, but also permanently discharged, dismissed by the High Council without any adversarial process or investigation. The results of such dismissal is not only that the magistrate is dismissed, but also that he can never in his life, directly or indirectly, be employed in public service, even not as a lawyer. This is nothing but a social death penalty, and that without any contradictory procedure. This makes judges, notably the judges who has to decide in Gülen cases, the judges who had to decide in the case of Mr. Yalçınkaya, vulnerable. It is essential, I do not have to explain that to your court, that judges are not vulnerable when they do their duty. Due to this Article 3, they were vulnerable. Second point, this possibility is not a theoretical one. Since 16 July 2016 until 22 July 2022, when the last dismissal according to this procedure was decided, the High Council dismissed 4,360 judges and prosecutors, 20% of the total magistrates plus minus. All courts deciding in the case of the applicant were affected. All judges deciding in the applicant's case were working in a court where colleagues of them suddenly were dismissed. We should value the impact of this. If we look at this court, and tomorrow 20% of the judges disappear, what is the impact on the other judges having to decide the day after in similar cases? So, for instance, 2 judges of the Court of Cassation were dismissed. In the Constitutional Court, 140 judges in the Court of Cassation were dismissed. Third, the High Council, as we said, it is nearly absolute powers, without contradictory procedure, a dismissal. This High Council is an administrative institution. It's not a judiciary institution. The President of the High Council is the Minister of Justice, a political person, member of the government, presiding this council. The composition, logically, of the Council was severely criticized by the Venice Commission, by Niels Muizenix, by the International Commission of Jurists. Fourth, it could have been a counterbalance, perhaps. In 2017, a possible appeal to the Council of State was installed against such dismissals. However, according to the communication of the Council of State itself, at the end of 2022, 5 years later, not one final decision has been taken. And the Council of State even had to apologize for the fact that 3% of the appeals, 3% were accepted in first instance, but immediately it added, it still has to be decided in second instance. This simply confirms, these 4 points, the untouchable position of the High Council in violation of the basic principles of the rule of law and the guarantee of irrevocability of judges, and more specifically, the judges who had to decide in this Yalçınkaya case, a person alleged to be member of the Gülen movement, was inexistent, in legally and in practical. Fifth, the Turkish government publicly instructs magistrates to consider the judicial corruption investigations of 2013, it was confirmed today by the government, as a coup d'etat set up by the Gülen movement. Even if proceedings in the United States proved the accuracy of these 2013 investigations, such instructions still figure prominently on internet nowadays. And the consequence, because we could say we don't have to take into account instructions, the consequence for not respecting such instructions are real and had an intimidating effect on the judges that had to deal with the case of Mr. Yalçınkaya. I will give an example to show how important these instructions and the not following instructions were, and it's a case that the court knows well. The judges, Mustafa Bashir and Metin Öçelik, released 62 police officers and 1 journalist accused, between brackets, of being a member of the Gülen movement. Immediately, President Erdogan and the High Council openly criticized the decision. May I pay your attention that the High Council criticized the content of a judicial decision. Result, the decisions were not executed. The judges were arrested. And the Venice Commission immediately criticized, stating, the facts described above clearly demonstrate that there are insufficient guarantees for the independence of the judiciary in Turkey. The case is well known. On 13 September 2022, your court came to the conclusion that in this case, Article 5, Paragraph 1 was violated. And may I pay your attention to the fact that the judgment in the this case in Turkey was used in the case of Mr. Yalçınkaya, and today is put forward as a justification of the conviction of Mr. Yalçınkaya, a case, may I remember, where the court found the violation of Article 5, Paragraph 1. To illustrate, sixth, the impact of this pressure, it has been noted in some cases that as soon as a judge is confronted with another judge taking a position even slightly favorable towards an accused who is considered to be part of the Gülen movement, completely unlawful and ununderstandable actions are taken. This is what happened, for instance, to Judge Beyit, who in no way is linked to the Gülen movement. I want to confirm that. But this Judge Beyit released 4 soldiers because he found that there was no evidence in the case file, which is his duty. 2 days later, police officers and a prosecutor entered his courtroom, the sacrosanct of the judge, took him in custody. He spent 3 months in prison. Seventh, several judges questioning the validity of the bylaw evidence were immediately dismissed or subjected to disciplinary or removed. A lot have been removed. This happened, for instance, in September, September 2016 to the 3 judges of the Second Hatay Assize Court, who had critical questions on bylaw and immediately was started a disciplinary procedure. If anyone, if your court would doubt about the link between the sanctions or the removals and the content of the decisions, in several majority cases, most of all removals, sometimes disciplinary sanctions, were taken only against the judges who voted in favor of the accused, not the judges who followed the general line of the government. In such a case, not only the irrevocability, because they were not revoked, but also the irremovability, because they most of all were removed, was not guaranteed anymore to judges who had to decide, as the judges in the applicant case, about bylaw and the proof that this can be. Finally, 8th point, the composition of the 2 main courts and the functioning of the 2 main courts that had to decide in the applicant's case. We know that the Court of Cassation was completely reorganized. We will not emphasize on that. However, in July 2016, 140 judges of the Court of Cassation were dismissed. In December 2017, some months before the Court of Cassation had to decide the case of the applicant, 100 new judges were designated by decree law. When the applicant case came before the 16th Criminal Chamber of the Court of Cassation, 7 out of the 18 judges had been substituted by decree law. Moreover, the rules have been changed. The President of the Chamber obtained completely arbitrary power to decide who would sit in the panel of 5, without rules, arbitrarily. And at any moment in time, so even when the deliberation started in the applicant case, the President could remove judges and replace them by others. Even assuming that this did not happen in the applicant's case, the mere fact that it could have happened created an enormous pressure on these judges to comply with the government policies when deciding on the case of Mr. Yalçınkaya, and the trust that the accused should have in this court, of course, was non-existent anymore. The composition of the Assize Court, who had to decide in the applicant's case, also was changed. It was seriously altered. In total, 173 of the second Assize courts were removed without being asked by the judges. And a week later, these cleansed courts, we cannot call it otherwise, were designated to be exclusively competent for the Gülen cases. As was stated in the press, it had to guarantee the decision to be taken against the Gülenists. And especially in regards with the Kayseri Assize Court, which intervened in the case of the applicant, the High Council appointed a new chairman, removed a judge without his request, and appointed a new judge instead. The government claims that the applicant puts forward abstract claims. In my opinion, there is nothing abstract in this missing 4,360 judges. In my opinion, there is nothing abstract in sanctioning these persons to a social death penalty. In my opinion, there's nothing abstract when judges are arrested in their courtroom because of doing their duty. There is nothing abstract in removing judges for the same reason to another place 1,000 kilometers away, and each time judges who have to decide in a similar case as in the case of Mr. Yalçınkaya. All these facts are structural. They are concrete. They were a threatening reality in the daily life of the judges who had to decide on Mr. Yalçınkaya. They affect, in a worrying way, the independence, the possibility to decide in an independent way. And how could an objective observer, not talking about the accused, how could an observer not come to the conclusion that there is a legitimate doubt about the independence of the courts and the judges having judged the case of the applicant? If ever that would be a misunderstanding, but I don't think it is, I was not pleading the lack of independence of the Turkish judiciary. That I have not been saying that, and I have not been pleading that. But I was pleading that the judges deciding in the Yalçınkaya case, specifically, I was more oriented what the Court of Cassation and the Assize Court were not in the possibility to decide in an independent way, because the court they are member of was cleansed. 140 of the members of the Court of Cassation, the 16th Chamber that decided on the case of Assize, 7 of 18 were replaced, 7 on 18. That's not a general element, that is a factual element. And knowing that, all this could happen in a context where unilateral, without contradiction, judges could be dismissed, which in reality happened. And that even no real appeal to the Council of State was possible, these judges in this specific context, knowing also that in the Court of Cassation the rules have changed, with the President having a discretionary power even during deliberations to change the composition of the panel, it's made that a normal human being as a judge was not free from fear. A judge who has to be afraid of what could happen, without contradiction, without appeal, a judge who has a fear from what could happen can never be considered by the accused, and also not by an objective observer, to be independent. That was the basic element, and that has nothing to do with the judiciary in globally, which I was not pleading about.